The monitoring station floated in the darkness near Neptune. It was a huge metal structure with antennas and sensors pointing in every direction. Inside, Commander Jake Porter sat in his chair on the bridge. He had been doing this job for 15 years, listening to the empty static of space. Earth had built many of these stations after humans spread across the solar system. They were supposed to watch for danger, but they mostly just heard nothing. Jake was drinking his coffee when the alarm went off. It was not the usual equipment malfunction sound. This was different. The main screen lit up with symbols no one had ever seen before. They were moving and changing, forming patterns that hurt to look at. Lieutenant Amy Chen jumped up from her station. She had joined the crew only 6 months ago, fresh from the academy on Mars. Her hands moved fast over her keyboard. "Sir, this is not from our solar system. The signal is coming from outside, way outside." Jake put down his coffee and stood up. His uniform was wrinkled from sitting too long. "How far outside?" 17 light years, sir. From the Kepler 442 system." Amy's voice shook a little. She knew what this meant. They all did. Captain Ryan Mitchell walked over from his post. He was Jake's second in command and his friend for 20 years. They had served together on Mars during the colony riots. "That signal has been traveling for 17 years to reach us." The bridge became very quiet. Everyone knew humans had never found alien life. They had searched the Moon, Mars, Europa, and dozens of other places, nothing. Now suddenly this, can we understand it? Jake asked. Amy nodded. "The computer is working on it. The signal has. It has a translation key built in, like they wanted anyone to understand it. Like a universal message, the screen changed. The strange symbols became words. Simple words at first, then sentences. The crew watched as the message formed in front of them. "We are dying. If anyone hears this, please help us. We are the Galactic Concordat, an alliance of 43 peaceful species. We are being hunted. The Devourers are killing us all. They have destroyed 17 of our worlds. Billions are dead. We have gathered our survivors on a planet we call Haven. We cannot hold much longer. If anyone hears this message, if anyone in the universe has the strength to help, please come. We are located at..." The message gave coordinates and then repeated. Jake read it 3 times. His mind tried to process what this meant. Aliens were real. They were out there, and they were asking for help. "How old is this recording?" Ryan asked. Amy checked her readings. Based on the signal degradation, it was sent 17 years ago. "If they were dying, then they might already be dead," Jake finished. He thought for a moment. "Send this to Earth, priority 1. Direct to the Global Defense Council." The message traveled from Neptune to Earth in 40 minutes. President Lisa Walker was woken up at 3 in the morning. She read the report twice, then called an emergency meeting. Within 2 hours, every major leader on Earth and the colonies was connected by video link. The debate started immediately. General Carl Foster from the North American military spoke first. "We don't know if this is real. It could be a trap that took 17 years to reach us," President Walker responded. "That would be the slowest ambush in history." Director Chen Liu from the Chinese Space Division added his thoughts. "We have to consider that these Devourers, if they exist, might come here eventually. If they're destroying worlds, Earth could be next." The European Union representative, Director Marie Dubois, disagreed. "We have no warships. We have defense platforms and some patrol boats. Nothing that could travel 17 light years and fight a war." President Walker looked at the others on her screen. "That's not entirely true, is it, General Foster?" The general shifted in his seat. "We have contingency plans, ships we've been building in secret, just in case." This was news to most of the council. For 50 years, Earth's military had been quietly preparing for the possibility of hostile contact. They had studied every science fiction scenario, every possible threat. Hidden in the asteroid belt and the moons of Jupiter, warships had been constructed. Not many, but enough to start. How many? President Walker asked. 70 combat-ready vessels. Another 200 that could be finished in 6 months with proper resources. The council went quiet. Everyone was thinking the same thing. This was the moment humanity had both feared and hoped for. Contact with alien life, but not peaceful contact. A cry for help. Dr. Kevin Brown, Earth's leading expert on theoretical xenobiology, spoke up. "May I point something out? This Concordat, they call themselves peaceful species. They have 43 member races, but they're losing to one enemy. That suggests something important." "What?" President Walker asked. "They don't know how to fight. Not really. They probably evolved on safe worlds, places without major predators or harsh conditions. Humans are different. We evolved on Earth where everything tried to kill us. We had ice ages, predators, diseases, and we fought each other for thousands of years. We might be exactly what they need. The vote was called an hour later. It was unanimous. Earth would answer the call. The news spread across the solar system within days. On Mars, the factories that built mining equipment switched to weapons production. The asteroid miners volunteered their ships for conversion to military use. Even the prison colonies in the outer system offered their inmates reduced sentences for military service. Jake Porter was recalled to Earth to help plan the mission. He stood in the Global Defense Council chamber, looking at the star map on the wall. 17 light-years seemed impossible, but humanity had developed jump drive technology 10 years ago. They had never used it for such a long distance, but the math said it would work. "We're really doing this," Ryan said, standing next to him. "We are," Jake confirmed. "All those years of listening to empty space, and when we finally hear something, it's a call for help. What if we're too late?" Jake thought about it. "Then we avenge them, and we make sure the Devourers never do it to anyone else." Across Earth and its colonies, recruitment centers opened. Millions volunteered. They came from everywhere. Farmers from Earth's recovered farmlands, miners from the asteroid belt, scientists from the research stations on Titan. Humanity was going to war, not for conquest or resources, but to save strangers they had never met. The shipyards worked without stopping. The secret warships were brought out and finished. New weapons were tested. Scientists studied the alien message for any information about the enemy. They found little, but what they found was concerning. The Devourers seemed to be a hive mind that consumed entire biospheres. They didn't conquer worlds. They ate them. President Walker gave a speech to humanity. She stood at the United Earth podium, the blue flag behind her. "For all of human history, we have looked at the stars and wondered if we were alone. Now we know we are not. There are others out there, and they need our help. We evolved on a dangerous world. We became strong because we had to. Now we will use that strength to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We go to the stars not as conquerors, but as guardians." The crowd cheered. Across every human settlement, people cheered. They had found their purpose among the stars. Admiral Paul Harrison stood in the observation deck of the Mars orbital shipyard. Through the huge windows, he could see hundreds of ships being built. Sparks flew from welding torches. Massive cranes moved hull sections into place. It was the largest military buildup in human history, and he was in charge of it all. Paul had been chosen because of his experience. He had commanded the defense fleet during the Europa Rebellion 10 years ago. That had been 3 ships against some angry colonists. This was different. This was 800 ships preparing to travel 17 light-years to fight an unknown enemy. Captain Maria Rodriguez walked up beside him. She was going to command the biggest ship, the Dreadnought Vengeance. It was 2 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to crack a small moon. "The crew assignments are complete, Admiral. 3,000 per dreadnought, 500 per cruiser, 100 per frigate." "How many total?" Paul asked, though he already knew. 40 million soldiers, support staff, and crew. The largest military force ever assembled. Paul nodded. 40 million people willing to travel across space to save aliens they had never met. It said something about humanity. He wasn't sure if it was something good or something dangerous. The shipyard was not the only place preparing for war. On Earth, every factory had switched to military production. They made guns, armor, medical supplies, and food that could last for years. The asteroid belt mining operations had tripled their output. They needed metal, lots of it. In the training camps, soldiers learned to fight in different gravities. The message from the Concordat had included information about Haven, the planet where they were making their last stand. It had lighter gravity than Earth, different air pressure, and 2 suns. Humans would need to adapt. Sergeant Tony Miller was one of the boarding team leaders. He trained his squad in a special facility that simulated alien environments. They practiced fighting in low gravity, high gravity, toxic atmospheres, and complete darkness. Tony had been a police officer in New Chicago before volunteering. He knew how to handle violence, but this was different. "Listen up," he told his squad during training. "We don't know what these Devourers look like. Could be bugs, could be robots, could be something we can't even imagine. But here's what we do know. Humans are good at killing things. We've been doing it since we learned to walk upright. These aliens asked for help because they're peaceful. They don't know how to fight dirty. We do. Private Danny Cooper raised his hand. He was young, maybe 20, from the farming communities in Africa. Sergeant, what if we can't beat them? What if they're too strong? Tony smiled. It was not a nice smile. Son, humans used to hunt mammoths with sharp sticks. We killed saber-toothed tigers with rocks. We survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars. Some space bugs don't scare me. The weapons humanity built were brutal. The Concordate message had described their own weapons. Precise energy beams, defensive shields, non-lethal deterrents. Humans took a different approach. They built railguns that fired metal slugs at incredible speeds. They made nuclear missiles, plasma flamethrowers, and chemical weapons. They built bombs that could crack continents and viruses designed to eat through any organic matter. Dr. Kevin Brown studied everything they knew about the Devourers. It wasn't much, but it was enough to worry him. He met with Admiral Harrison in the command center. They're described as a hive mind, Kevin explained. That means they think as one. No individuals, no fear, no hesitation. They consume entire biospheres to fuel their expansion. Like locusts? Paul asked. Worse. Locusts leave something behind. These things take everything. Plants, animals, even the atmosphere if it has useful elements. The planets they hit are left as dead rocks. Paul studied the reports, and the Concordate has been fighting them for how long? 50 Earth years from what we can determine. They've lost 17 worlds. Billions dead, yet they called themselves peaceful species. They don't know how to fight a real war. Kevin nodded. They evolved differently than us. The message included some information about their member species. Most come from worlds with stable climates, few predators, and abundant resources. They never needed to develop our level of aggression. Lucky them, Paul said. Until now. The fleet grew every day. The asteroid belt shipyards worked without stopping. They built ships designed for one purpose: destruction. The dreadnoughts like Vengeance were floating fortresses. The battleships carried enough nuclear weapons to sterilize a planet. The cruisers were fast and deadly. The frigates were small but vicious, designed to swarm larger enemies. Each ship was crewed by humans who had volunteered for what might be a one-way trip. They came from every nation, every colony, every walk of life. They were united by one purpose: to answer the call for help. Lieutenant Sam Johnson was assigned as tactical officer on the Vengeance. He had graduated top of his class from the military academy on the moon. He spent his days running combat simulations, trying to prepare for an enemy they knew almost nothing about. The problem, he told Captain Rodriguez during a planning session, is that we're going in blind. We don't know their numbers, their technology, or their tactics. Maria looked at the star map on her display. We know they can be fought. The Concordate has been holding them off, even if they're losing. That means they can be killed. The Concordate is barely holding on, and that message is 17 years old. They might already be gone. Then we make the Devourers pay for it. The preparation was not just military. Earth scientists worked on medical treatments for alien diseases. Engineers designed portable habitats that could work in any environment. Linguists studied the Concordate translation matrix, learning how to communicate with species they had never met. The space elevator in Ecuador worked day and night, lifting supplies to orbit. The magnetic launchers on the moon fired cargo pods toward Mars every hour. Humanity was mobilizing on a scale never seen before. President Walker visited the main training camp in Australia. She walked among the soldiers, talking to them, thanking them. She stopped at a group of young recruits who were practicing hand-to-hand combat. "Why did you volunteer?" she asked one of them, a young woman named Betty Clark. Betty stopped and saluted. "My grandmother survived the water wars, Madam President. She always said humans are at their best when protecting others. I want to prove her right." The president smiled. "I think you already have." Not everyone agreed with the mission. There were protests in some cities. People argued that humanity should stay hidden, that getting involved in an alien war was suicide. But they were a minority. Most of humanity was eager to finally have a purpose beyond mere survival. The jump drives were tested repeatedly. They had never been used for such a long distance. The scientists ran calculation after calculation. It would work, they said, but it would take 6 months. 6 months traveling through folded space, hoping the math was right. Colonel Janet Foster was put in charge of ground forces. She had led the successful defense of the Martian colonies during the dust storm riots. She knew how to fight in hostile environments. "We're training for every possibility," she told her staff. Desert combat, underwater combat, zero-gravity combat. We don't know what Haven looks like now. For all we know, we'll be fighting in the ruins of dead cities. The weapons were tested in the outer system. Nuclear detonations lit up the darkness beyond Pluto. Railguns punched holes through captured asteroids. Plasma weapons turned ice moons into steam. Humanity was showing its teeth. As the departure date approached, the fleet gathered at the assembly point near Jupiter. 800 ships holding 40 million humans. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. They had painted the ships black with Earth's blue and green emblem on the hulls. They wanted the galaxy to know who was coming. Admiral Harrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the battleship Terra's Wrath. He looked at the fleet on his display. In 3 days they would jump. They would travel 17 light years to save strangers from monsters. God help them, his aide said quietly. Paul turned to look at him. The Concordat? No, sir, the Devourers. They have no idea what's coming for them. The last defensive platform around Haven was burning when the human fleet arrived. Ambassador Zrix watched from the planetary command center as another explosion tore through the orbital station. His 4 eyes, a trait of his species, the Altarians, were wet with despair. They had held for so long, but it was ending. The Altarians were one of the oldest members of the Concordat. They had achieved spaceflight 3,000 years ago. They had never fought a war until the Devourers came. Zrix commanded what was left of their fleet, 12 damaged ships against thousands of Devourer vessels. Ambassador, his aide, a young Altarian named Kel, spoke urgently. The inner defense grid is failing. The Devourers will reach the surface within hours. Zrix looked at the tactical display. Red dots swarmed everywhere. Each dot was a Devourer ship. The blue dots, the Concordat defenders, were disappearing one by one. Down on the planet's surface, 30 billion refugees from 17 dead worlds waited for the end. Send the final message, Zrix said quietly. Tell any survivors to scatter. Maybe some can escape. Before Kel could comply, every alarm in the command center went off at once. The space above Haven rippled like water. Then it tore open. Ships poured through the tiers in space. Hundreds of them, all painted black with blue and green markings. They came through the jump points with violence. Not the smooth transitions the Concordat ships managed, but explosive arrivals that sent gravitational waves across the system. These ships were different from anything Zrix had ever seen. They were angular, brutal things covered in weapons. They looked like they were designed by a species that enjoyed war. Every screen in the command center lit up with the same image. A human face appeared, flat features, forward-facing predator eyes, and skin without scales or fur. The creature spoke, and the translators worked to convert the alien language. This is Admiral Paul Harrison of the United Earth Death World Armada. We received your distress signal. We are here to help. All Concordat vessels fall back to the planet. We will handle the Devourers. Zrix couldn't speak. Neither could anyone else in the command center. They had sent their message of desperation 17 years ago, never truly believing anyone would answer. Now these strange aliens had arrived with a war fleet. The human ships didn't wait for a response. They accelerated toward the Devourer swarm with shocking speed. The Devourers, for their part, seemed confused. They had never encountered these newcomers before. The hive mind took precious seconds to analyze the threat. Those seconds cost them. The human ships opened fire while still accelerating. Not with the precise energy beams the Concordat used, but with primitive kinetic weapons and nuclear missiles. Railgun rounds traveled at significant fractions of light speed, punching through Devourer ships like paper. Nuclear explosions created temporary suns in the darkness. Captain Maria Rodriguez commanded from the bridge of the Vengeance. The massive dreadnought's guns fired in sequence, each shot calculated to cause maximum damage. Target their formation leaders. Break their coordination. Her tactical officer, Sam Johnson, highlighted targets on the display. They're trying to adapt, Captain. Shifting to dispersed formations? Then we adjust too. Release the fighter squadrons. Bay doors opened along the Vengeance's hull. Hundreds of small fighter craft launched into space. Each one was piloted by a human who had trained for this moment. They dove into the Devourer swarm with suicidal courage, firing missiles and kinetic rounds at point-blank range. The Devourers responded with their own weapons. Biological projectiles that ate through metal, energy fields that disrupted electronics, and swarms of smaller organisms that tried to board enemy ships. Against the Concordat, these tactics had been devastating. Against humans, they met unexpected resistance. When biological weapons hit human ships, emergency crews in sealed suits cut away the infected sections with plasma torches. When boarding organisms penetrated the hulls, human marines met them with flamethrowers and chemical weapons. The humans didn't just fight back. They seemed to enjoy it. Sergeant Tony Miller led his squad onto a Devourer ship that had been crippled by railgun fire. They entered through a hole torn in its organic hull. The interior was a nightmare. Walls that pulsed like living tissue, air that smelled of rot, and corridors that shifted and changed. "Masks on," Tony ordered. "Johnson, Cooper, take point. Watch for movement." They moved through the ship with practiced efficiency. When Devourer drones attacked, insectoid creatures with too many legs and sharp mandibles, the humans responded with controlled bursts of gunfire. They had trained for this. They had imagined worse. Private Danny Cooper, the young farmer from Africa, put 3 rounds into a drone that dropped from the ceiling. "These things aren't so tough, Sergeant." "Stay focused," Tony replied. "We're here for the command node." They found it in the center of the ship, a massive organic computer made of neural tissue. Tony placed the nuclear charge against it, set the timer, and ordered his squad out. They escaped just before the explosion tore the ship apart. Back in Haven's command center, Ambassador Zrix watched the battle with disbelief. The humans were winning. In just 1 hour, they had destroyed more Devourer ships than the Concordat had managed in a month. "How?" Kell asked. "Their weapons are primitive. Kinetic rounds and nuclear fission. We abandoned such things millennia ago." An older Altarian commander yet answered. "Sometimes primitive is effective. Energy shields can deflect beam weapons. They do nothing against a solid piece of metal moving at 20% the speed of light." The battle raged for 6 hours. The human fleet pushed through the Devourer swarm like a blade. When the Devourers adapted to one tactic, the humans simply switched to another. They used nuclear mines, ramming attacks, and even threw asteroids accelerated by their engines. Admiral Paul Harrison coordinated from his flagship. He watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The Devourers were pulling back, trying to regroup. He wouldn't let them. "All ships pursue and destroy. Don't let them reform." The smaller human frigates were fastest. They chased down fleeing Devourer vessels and destroyed them with precise railgun fire. No mercy was given. No quarter offered. This was not war as the Concordat understood it. This was extermination. Dr. Kevin Brown studied the sensor data from his position on the science vessel Darwin. "Admiral, I'm seeing something interesting. The Devourer ships, they're all connected. It really is a hive mind. If we can disrupt their communication..." "Do it," Paul ordered. Kevin's team released a virus they had prepared, not biological, but electronic. It targeted the quantum entanglement the Devourers used to coordinate. It didn't destroy the connection, but it added noise, confusion. For creatures that had always thought as one, it was agony. The effect was immediate. Devourer ships began firing on each other. Some flew in random directions. Others simply shut down, floating dead in space. Down on Haven's surface, millions of refugees watched the sky. They could see the flashes of explosions, brief stars that marked the death of Devourer ships. For the first time in decades, they had hope. Colonel Janet Foster prepared her ground forces for deployment. "If any Devourers reach the surface, we stop them. No exceptions." Her soldiers were equipped with weapons designed on Earth: projectile rifles, grenade launchers, and portable missile systems. They looked primitive compared to Concordat technology, but Janet knew they were effective. A group of Concordat soldiers approached her. They were from various species: tall, thin Altarians, short and stocky Braxians, and serpentine Quellans. They all looked terrified. "You came," one of them said through a translator. "We sent our message into the dark, never believing anyone would answer." Janet looked at them. These were beings who had evolved on peaceful worlds. They had never needed to become killers. "We heard you, we came. And we're going to make sure the Devourers never hurt anyone again." The battle turned into a rout. The Devourers, faced with an enemy they couldn't easily defeat, began to retreat. But the humans didn't let them go. They pursued, destroyed, and hunted down every fleeing ship. Captain Maria Rodriguez personally led the assault on the Devourer command ship. It was massive, 5 kilometers of organic horror. Her dreadnought's guns pounded it while fighters swarmed around it like angry wasps. "Captain," Sam Johnson reported, "I'm reading massive energy buildup. They're preparing to jump." Not happening, Maria said. She turned to her helm officer. Ram them, Captain. You heard me. All hands prepare for impact. Emergency evacuation protocols. The Vengeance accelerated toward the command ship. Its armored prow smashed into the organic hull. Both ships were destroyed in the resulting explosion, but Maria and her crew escaped in pods, already being picked up by other human vessels. The remaining Devourers fled the system. For the first time since they had begun their expansion, they had been defeated. Haven was saved. The battle for Haven continued for 3 days after the initial assault. The Devourers had retreated from the system, but they left behind thousands of seeded organisms on the planet's surface. These creatures were designed to consume everything organic, preparing worlds for the main hive fleet. Against the Concordate's energy weapons, they had been nearly unstoppable. Against human flamethrowers and chemical weapons, they died screaming. Colonel Janet Foster stood in the ruins of Haven's capital city, watching her troops clear another sector. The city had once been beautiful, with crystalline towers that caught the light of 2 suns. Now half of it was destroyed, consumed by devourer organisms before the humans arrived. Sector 7 clear, reported Captain Fred Barnes over the radio. Found another nest. Burned it out. Good, Janet replied. Keep pushing east. We need to secure the refugee camps before nightfall. The refugee camps held millions of beings from destroyed worlds. They had been waiting to die when the humans arrived. Now they watched in amazement as human soldiers fought in conditions that would kill most concordate species. The temperature on Haven fluctuated wildly between day and night, from freezing to boiling. The atmosphere was breathable, but contained trace toxins that required most species to wear filters. The gravity was lighter than Earth, but still variable due to the planet's irregular core. The humans adapted without complaint. Sergeant Tony Miller's squad was assigned to protect a medical camp full of wounded Altarians. The camp was attacked by a wave of Devourer drones that had been hiding underground. Tony and his squad met them with brutal efficiency. Cooper, left flank. Johnson, grenades on that cluster, Tony shouted as he fired his rifle in controlled bursts. The fight lasted 10 minutes. When it was over, 40 Devourer drones lay dead. Tony's squad had not lost a single soldier. The Altarian doctors watched in shock. How do you fight without fear? One of them asked Tony. Tony reloaded his rifle. Who says we're not afraid? We just don't let it stop us. Humans have been afraid of things in the dark for millions of years. We learned to kill them anyway. In orbit, Admiral Paul Harrison studied the reports. The Devourers were regrouping 3 systems away, gathering their forces for a counterattack. He wouldn't give them the chance. We're going after them, he told his command staff. Half the fleet stays here to protect Haven. The other half comes with me. We're going to hit them while they're weak. Captain Jake Porter, recently promoted and given command of the battleship Earth's Vengeance, volunteered to lead the assault fleet. He had been there when the first signal arrived. He wanted to see this through. The assault fleet jumped to the system where the Devourers were gathering. They found 10,000 enemy ships forming up near a gas giant. The Devourers had learned from the first battle. They had adapted their formations, strengthened their shields against kinetic weapons, and prepared biological weapons specifically designed to target human physiology. It didn't matter. The humans had learned too. Dr. Kevin Brown had studied captured Devourer technology and organisms. He had found weaknesses. They're silicon-based, he told the fleet. Their organic components can't handle extreme temperature changes. Alternate hot and cold attacks. The human fleet attacked with a new strategy. Ships fired superheated plasma, followed immediately by liquid nitrogen missiles. The temperature shock shattered Devourer hulls like glass. Nuclear weapons were detonated in patterns designed to create thermal stress waves. The Devourers tried to adapt again, but humans were unpredictable. When the enemy adjusted to one tactic, humans would switch to something completely different. They would ram ships, use gravity slingshots to accelerate projectiles, or simply overwhelm sections with massive firepower. Lieutenant Sam Johnson, serving on Earth's Vengeance after the destruction of the original Vengeance, noticed something important. Captain Porter, the Devourer ships are communicating with quantum entanglement, but there's a pattern. They're hierarchical. Some ships are more important than others. Jake studied the data. Command nodes. Take them out and sections of their fleet go dormant. The information was shared across the fleet. Human ships began targeting what appeared to be random vessels, but were actually critical communication nodes. As each one was destroyed, dozens of Devourer ships would stop responding, floating helplessly until they were destroyed. Back on Haven, the Concordat leadership met with the human commanders. Ambassador Zrix and the other surviving leaders were grateful but also disturbed. "Your species is terrifying," Zrix told Colonel Foster. "You fight like you enjoy it." Janet considered this. "We don't enjoy it, but we're good at it. We evolved on a world where everything tried to kill us. Our ancestors had to fight for every meal, every safe place to sleep. Violence is in our DNA. But you came to save us. You didn't have to." "That's the thing about humans," Janet explained. "We're violent, yes, but we choose who to be violent toward. We looked at the situation and made a choice." The Concordat asked for help. The Devourers are the aggressors. The choice was easy. The ground war on Haven revealed more about human nature. When Concordat soldiers hesitated to enter Devourer-infected zones, humans went first. When refugee camps ran low on food, human soldiers shared their rations even though the alien food barely sustained them. When children of various species were orphaned, human soldiers adopted them, protecting them as their own. Private Betty Clark found a small Altarian child hiding in rubble. The child's parents were dead, consumed by devourer organisms. Betty picked up the child and carried her to safety, singing human lullabies that the child couldn't understand but found comforting anyway. The counterattack in space was failing for the Devourers. They had never faced an enemy like this. The Concordat had fought defensively, trying to protect their worlds. Humans fought offensively, seeking out the enemy to destroy them. Captain Maria Rodriguez, recovered from her escape pod and given command of a new dreadnought called Humanity's Wrath, led a strike deep into Devourer-controlled space. They found a breeding world where the Devourers grew their ships and organisms. "Nuclear bombardment authorized," Admiral Harrison ordered. Maria hesitated. "Sir, that's an entire ecosystem." "An ecosystem designed to create weapons that consume other worlds. Fire." The nuclear missiles launched. Within hours, the breeding world was a radioactive wasteland. The Devourers had lost the ability to quickly replace their losses. The war was turning. For the first time in 50 years, the Devourers were losing ground. They tried new tactics, biological plagues designed for human biology, gravity weapons, even attempts at communication to negotiate. The humans responded to each attempt with violence. Dr. Kevin Brown was working on something special. Using captured Devourer communication nodes, he was building a weapon. Not a bomb or a gun, but something worse. A virus that would attack the hive mind itself. "If this works," he told Admiral Harrison, "we can turn their greatest strength against them. Their shared consciousness means shared pain. Infect one, and they all suffer." "Do it," Paul ordered without hesitation. The virus was deployed through captured Devourer drones that were released back to their fleet. Within days, the effect was visible. Devourer ships would suddenly scream, a psychic wail that could be heard on communication frequencies. They would thrash wildly, firing at nothing, then shut down. On Haven, the Concordat species were rebuilding with human help. Engineers from Earth showed them how to build kinetic weapons and nuclear reactors. It went against everything the peaceful species believed, but they were learning that the universe was not as kind as they had hoped. A young Altarian soldier named Kess approached Sergeant Tony Miller. "Can you teach me to fight like a human?" Tony looked at the alien, tall, thin, with 4 delicate arms, not built for war. "I can teach you to survive like a human." Sometimes that means fighting. Sometimes it means knowing when not to fight. What's the difference? Experience. And a lot of scars. The siege of Haven was broken. The Devourers retreated further, abandoning 3 more systems. Human ships pursued them relentlessly. No mercy was offered. No quarter given. This was not conquest, it was extermination of a threat. The galaxy was learning what Earth had forged in its children. They were not conquerors or explorers. They were survivors who had become predators, and they had chosen to hunt the monsters that hunted others. By the end of the 3rd day, Haven was secure. The Devourers were in full retreat, and the Concordat had learned that their saviors were perhaps more dangerous than their enemies. But they were grateful nonetheless. The humans had answered their call and turned the tide of war. 6 months after the battle for Haven, Ambassador Zrix stood in the newly built council chamber. Representatives from all 43 concordate species had gathered, along with Admiral Paul Harrison and a delegation from Earth. The chamber was different now. Where once it had only ceremonial guards with decorative weapons, now there were human Marines with very real rifles. The Devourers had been pushed back to the edge of known space. They still existed, lurking in dark systems, but they no longer advanced. The human fleet had established a defensive line, a wall of ships and weapons that the Devourers dared not cross. Zrix called the meeting to order. His four eyes looked tired but hopeful. We gathered today to discuss the future. The immediate threat has passed thanks to our human friends, but we must decide what comes next. Elder Yos of the Braxians spoke first. His species were short and stocky, evolved on a high-gravity world with no predators. The humans saved us, but they also terrify us. We have seen what they are capable of. How do we know they won't turn those weapons on us? Admiral Paul Harrison stood to address the chamber. He was wearing his dress uniform, but everyone could see the weapon at his side. Humans never went completely unarmed anymore. You're right to be afraid, Paul said simply. We are dangerous. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. We became killers to survive, but we also became something else. We became protectors. How can killers be protectors? Asked Ambassador Chin of the Quellans, her serpentine form coiled nervously. Paul thought for a moment. On Earth we have animals called wolves. They're predators, hunters, killers, but a wolf will die protecting its pack. Humans are the same. We choose our pack. We've chosen you. The chamber was quiet. Then a young Altarian, barely an adult, stood up. It was Kess, the soldier who had asked to learn from the humans. I've trained with the humans for 6 months. They taught me to fight, yes, but they also taught me when not to fight. They taught me that strength without purpose is meaningless. They have chosen to use their strength to protect us. Captain Maria Rodriguez had been invited to speak about the military situation. She activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. The Devourers are contained but not defeated. They're adapting, learning, preparing. They'll be back, maybe in a year, maybe in 10. When they come, you need to be ready. That's why we proposed the Guardian Protocol, Paul added. Human fleets will establish permanent bases in concordate space. We'll patrol the borders, train your soldiers, and respond to any threats. Not as conquerors, but as protectors. Elder Yos was skeptical. And what do you want in return? A purpose, Paul replied. Humans have always been warriors. For thousands of years, we fought each other. Now we want to fight for something better. Let us be your shield. You continue being the peaceful, enlightened civilizations you are. We'll handle the darkness. The debate went on for hours. Some species were grateful and immediately agreed. Others were suspicious, wondering if this was just another form of conquest. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. The Guardian Protocol was approved. Captain Jake Porter was put in charge of Guardian Station 1, a massive fortress built at the intersection of 3 major hyperspace routes. His crew was mostly human, but more and more concordate species were volunteering to serve alongside them. A young Altarian named Kel, who had been Zrix's aide, was one of the first to join. Why? Jake asked him during his interview. Because hiding behind others isn't right, Kel replied. The humans showed us that sometimes you have to fight for peace. I want to learn. The integration was not easy. Concordate species struggled with human military discipline and violence. Humans struggled with alien psychology and peaceful instincts, but slowly they learned from each other. Dr. Kevin Brown established the Interspecies Military Academy on Haven. It was a place where concordate species could learn human tactics while humans learned alien philosophy and technology. We're not trying to turn them into us, Kevin explained to critics back on Earth. We're trying to make sure they never have to become us. But if something like the Devourers comes again, they need to be ready. The Academy's first class had 300 students from 20 different species. They learned small unit tactics, space combat, and most importantly, when violence was necessary and when it wasn't. Sergeant Tony Miller was one of the instructors. He taught hand-to-hand combat to beings who had never thrown a punch in their species' entire history. It was challenging. You're not trying to kill, he explained to a group of young Altarians. You're trying to stop the threat. Sometimes that means killing, but not always. A good warrior knows the difference. Private Danny Cooper, promoted to corporal now, assisted with the training. He had grown harder in the months of fighting, but also wiser. The hardest part isn't learning to fight, he told the students. It's learning when to stop. The human colonies back in Earth's system were changing too. The successful defense of Haven had given humanity new confidence. They were no longer alone in the universe, and they had found a noble purpose. Military service became even more prestigious. Children grew up wanting to be guardians. President Lisa Walker visited Guardian Station 1 a year after its establishment. She met with both human and alien crew members. In the station's observation deck, she stood with Admiral Harrison looking out at the stars. "We've changed," she said. "Humanity, I mean. We're still warriors, but now we're warriors with a cause." Paul nodded. "We needed this. For all our history, we've fought each other over resources, ideology, religion. Now we fight to protect those who can't protect themselves. It's better. Is it enough? Can we really protect them forever? Nothing lasts forever. But we can give them time. Time to grow, to learn, maybe even to become strong enough to protect themselves." The Devourers tested the Guardian lines several times over the next 2 years. Each time they were repelled with devastating losses. They learned that approaching concordate space meant facing humanity, and humanity was ruthless in defense of their adopted family. One attack came through an unexpected vector, bypassing the Guardian stations. A small Devourer fleet reached a concordate colony world called New Paradise. The local defense force, trained by humans but still mostly peaceful concordate species, had to hold until help arrived. Commander Yet, the old Altarian who had served during the original invasion, led the defense. He used every tactic the humans had taught him. When the Devourers landed ground forces, he met them with fire and chemical weapons. When they adapted, he switched tactics using the planet's weather patterns against them. "Hold the line," he shouted to his mixed species troops. "The Guardians are coming, but we hold until they arrive. We are not prey. Not anymore." They held for 18 hours until Captain Jake Porter's fleet arrived and destroyed the Devourer forces. Of the colony's 10 million inhabitants, only 1,000 were lost. Under the old way of fighting, they all would have died. Jake found Yet after the battle, exhausted but alive. "You did well, Commander. You fought like a human." "No," Yet corrected. "I fought like a Guardian. We're all Guardians now." The story of New Paradise spread through concordate space. More and more aliens volunteered to join the Guardian forces. They would never be as naturally violent as humans, but they were learning to defend themselves. 5 years after first contact, a new threat emerged from deep space. Not the Devourers, but something else. A machine intelligence that consumed entire star systems to build more of itself. It sent a probe into concordate space. The probe was met by a fleet of Guardian ships. Half were crewed by humans, half by trained concordate species. Together they destroyed the probe and sent a clear message back to whatever had sent it. This space was protected. Ambassador Zrix, now old and nearing the end of his life, gave a speech on the 5th anniversary of Haven's salvation. "We asked the universe for help, and the universe answered with humanity. They came from a death world, shaped by violence and struggle. They could have been our conquerors. Instead, they became our guardians. Some still fear them, and perhaps they should. Humans are dangerous, but they are our dangerous protectors, our violent guardians. They stand between us and the darkness, not because they must, but because they choose to. To our human friends, we say this: we see what you are, warriors, killers, survivors. But we also see what you've chosen to be, protectors, teachers, friends. You came from a death world, but you've given us life." Captain Maria Rodriguez, now an admiral herself, established the Deep Space Warning Network, stations at the edge of known space, staffed by humans and concordate volunteers watching for threats. The galaxy would never be caught unprepared again. Dr. Kevin Brown's research into the Devourers led to a disturbing discovery. They weren't native to this galaxy. They had come from somewhere else, fleeing something even worse. He shared this with the Guardian Council. "There are worse things out there," he warned. "The Devourers were running from something. We need to be ready." The Guardians expanded their training. They developed new weapons, new tactics, and new alliances with species beyond the concordate. Humanity's reputation spread. The Death Worlders who protected the peaceful. Some species came seeking to test themselves against humanity. They were met with measured responses. If they came in peace,